Shanika. Praise be to God, and there is no one heart. He has no partners. Inshallah, in this khutbah, we will look at Quranic verses that speak about the role of men and women in Islam. So we know from the Quran that God teaches us very clearly that men and women are not the same. They are created equally, but they are not the same. God has endowed certain qualities to men, certain qualities to women, and from what we understand from the Quran is that we are supposed to be complementing each other. And the system that God has put forth in the Quran is that men are given certain responsibilities and women are also given certain responsibilities. And when both parties take their responsibilities together and function as a unit, that's when the ideal family unit is created. And when we follow God's guidelines, His guidance, we are able to raise a righteous family. So in Surah 4, verse 34, God outlines how He sees the role of a man and a woman. He says very clearly that the men are made responsible for the women. This is a very important statement because this puts a lot of responsibility on men when it comes to their families and the women who are married to them in particular. God says that it is the responsibility of the man. So the man has the responsibility to take care of the women, provide for her, clothe her, feed her. That is his primary responsibility. Sure, there are cases where it may be in a different temporarily, but as far as the Quran and God is concerned, God makes it very clear that the primary responsibility for that is on the shoulders of the man. This means that all believing men should strive to take up that role. There may be situations where they may not be able to perform it due to some issues or challenges or whatever it may be, but they should continue to strive and to take up this responsibility. They should not pass it on to the woman and say, okay, you deal with it, I'm going to sit at home and do nothing. We've seen many societies and many places where this is the norm, and the women are suffering because the men simply don't do anything. And there are other societies where the women are suffering because the men refuse to do their responsibilities or lump it all on them or oppress them. And both are two extremes. The Quran gives us a very good balance where the man is given his set of responsibilities and the woman is given her set of responsibilities. And when they perform it together as a unit with mutual respect, love and affection, that's when the family unit will progress. Children that grow under such an environment will have the best family environment because that's God's system. If we make our own system, it may have major problems. So that is why it is very important for us to identify and learn from the Quran what God expects of us. So He's made it very clear that men are responsible for the women. So if we raise boys with that sense of knowledge or with that knowledge, what happens is that when they grow up and become adults, they know that it's their responsibility. So they'll strive towards it. They'll strive towards becoming a provider, becoming a breadwinner, taking care of the women in their families, being responsible, things like that. And also when we raise boys, we teach them also, you are responsible, so you have to go and do this. These are the values that we are supposed to give the next generation. But if we don't follow that thing, then obviously they're going to live the way they like, and they're going to think that this is the way it is or that is the way, whatever the society tells them, that's what they're going to follow. And eventually that will lead to the breakdown of the family system. That's what we see in many societies. So clearly, God says, and God has endowed them with certain qualities and made them the bread earners. God made the man the bread earner. The man should strive. Should strive. It's not whether you succeed or to what extent you succeed. If you have that sense of responsibility and you strive to do what God has appointed you to do, He will support you. But if you just sit there doing nothing and let me get some dowry from the woman or family, let me just knock on the door of my father-in-law, see how much lakhs of rupees he will give it me. This kind of mindset is built up in many parts of our own societies also, where they think, I need some money for the business now, you get it, bring it from your home, and they oppress the woman when she is not able to give or give in to the demands of the husband. And then they will compare, oh, look at his wife's family, they gave him 5 lakhs rupees to do their business. What are your family doing for me? Nothing. So why is this kind of mindset in those societies? Men are not supposed to even ask the woman to give them money. It's just voluntarily. If the woman feels like giving, yes, so be it. She's not obliged to give you anything. But you, on the other hand, are responsible for her well-being. That's what the Quran says very clearly. It's your responsibility. Whatever she extends towards you in terms of monetary or whatever it may be, it is up to her. Her money is hers. It's not a very good news for most men, but her money is hers and your money is hers also. Part of it is hers. So that's how the Quran has put the responsibility on the men. The righteous women will cheerfully accept this arrangement since it is God's commandment and honor their husbands during their absence. So here now the responsibility of the woman comes into play. God makes it very clear that righteous women who are righteous, they are God-fearing, they are conscious. They understand, they are aware that, okay, this is my husband's responsibility. And I should not, step into his responsibility and push him all over and take the issues in my hand. I should let the man do what a man is supposed to do and support him in his efforts. So this is what is very clearly mentioned in the Quran. So the role of a woman, and according to the Quran, is that of a support. She supports the man in performing his responsibilities. And sometimes now some may ask, okay, but what if the man doesn't move at all, doesn't do anything, he doesn't take responsibility, doesn't take, what am I supposed to do? Should I just let him do whatever he wants? That will cause suffering to my family, my kids. That the Quran is very clear. It says that you are supposed to make your partner aware of his responsibilities and push him in that direction. But the responsibility still remains on the man. Because the moment that is flipped, the marriage starts to decline, it starts to fall. And you must have noticed that in many marriages where the roles are reversed. It may be because because there's an insecurity or there's a fear, so they start flipping the roles, and then what happens is that the man just doesn't take any responsibility. The woman is overburdened with all the responsibilities. She has to attend to the kids. Also, she has to attend to the finances of the family because the man just wouldn't do anything. And then conflicts begin, which eventually, in most cases, ends up very badly. So men have to take their responsibility. Is very clear in the Quran. We have to encourage our brothers also. If we have brothers who are not doing that, we remind them of what God has commanded us, and also remind our sisters of their part of the responsibility, which is to cheerfully accept this arrangement and take up the role of a supporter. Since it is God's commandment, this is not the commandment of a man or a woman, it's a commandment from God. God set it up like that. That's, if you look in nature also, you will find it. It's the basic, very basic nature. So it is very evident. So that is why God says that it is His commandment, and honor their husbands during their absence. If you experience rebellion from the women, you shall first talk to them, then may use negative incentives like deserting them in bed, and then you may beat them. If they obey you, you are not permitted to transgress against them. God is most high, supreme. So then there are certain directives or commandments that are given by God in order to establish order in the family. Very clear. But it is given to a man who's performing his responsibilities. That we should not forget. So when God says that you may do this, you may take these corrective measures in situation of a rebellion from your partner, God is talking to a man who's fulfilling his responsibilities. He's not talking to a man who's just signed a marriage contract. He is fulfilling his responsibility. Only then he can take the corrective measures that God has given him right for him to take in case his partner is not cooperating with him. So these are the guidelines that God has given us. Very clearly we know that in each community or in each family unit, this is the system that God wants us to follow. That the man carries out his duties and responsibilities, and the woman carries out her responsibilities. The Quran also teaches us that the believing men and women are equal when it comes to belief. So this is what, when we talk about these laws in the Quran, we should not be under the impression that one gender is superior over the other. It's very clear in the Quran that both believing men and women are equal. There's no difference. It's just that God has given each gender different roles to fulfill in this worldly life, and that is for their own best, to make sure that they stick together and function together as a family unit. So that is why God says very clearly that there is equality between men and women. There is no difference. God says in Surah 4 verse 69, this is equality of believers. Those who obey God and the messenger belong with those blessed by God. The prophets, the saints, the martyrs, and the righteous. They are the best company. So here God says, those who obey God and the messenger belong to those blessed by God. He didn't say those men or those women. Anyone who obeys God and the messenger belong with those blessed by God. The prophets, the saints, the martyrs, the righteous, these are the best company. So whenever God speaks about righteous believers or the hereafter, it's all the same, regardless of whether you're a man or a woman. There's no difference. Also in Surah 33 verse 35, God teaches us equality of men and women. The submitting men, the submitting women, the believing men, the believing women, the obedient men, the obedient women, the truthful men, the truthful women, the steadfast men, the steadfast women, the reverend men, the reverend women, the charitable men, the charitable women, the fasting men, the fasting women, the chaste men, the chaste women, and the men who commemorate God frequently, and the commemorating women. God has prepared for them forgiveness and a great recompense. So here He's made it very clear. These are the qualities that make sure that we are going to be successful in the hereafter. And being a woman or a man does not make any difference when it comes to our success in the hereafter. We are equal, and therefore these things, being truthful, a man can be truthful, a woman can be truthful, steadfast, being steadfast at the face of hardship. It's not just men who can be, steadfast, women can also be steadfast. And that's why God says if they are steadfast, when they are facing challenges, a woman can also be strong and put her hope and trust in God, just like men. So God rewards. There's no difference whether it is a man or a woman. Both of them are striving in the cause of God. The reverend men and the reverend women. Just as men can be reverent and think about God and be aware of His laws and lead a righteous life, women can also do the same. Therefore, that's why God says very clearly, the reverend men and the reverend women. The fasting men, the fasting women. We know what that is. Observe the fasting. The chaste men and the chaste women. And the men who commemorate God frequently and the commemorating women. So in all these matters of religion, God makes it very clear that men and women are equal. There is no difference. But however, this is not what other religions, many other religions, including traditional Islam, is teaching. Women are denied the opportunity to do fasting in the month of Ramadan, for example, if they are menstruating women. Also observing the contact prayers. They are considered dirty. You are not supposed to go to the Masjid. You are not supposed to touch the Quran. Where is the equality there? It's something that is biologically in her body. She has no control over it. She was born with it, and it happens at a particular age. So she cannot choose to do anything about it. But so it's God's system. But the men, certain men in certain religions, even this is in Judaism also. If you're menstruating, you're not allowed to go to a place of prayer. So these are laws which have no basis in the Quran. It goes against the Quran, totally categorically against the Quran. They are considered as unclean. The only thing that God tells at that time is not to approach husband and wife, not to approach each other at that time, and that to make so that they don't have any kind of other difficulties. It's very clear, but it has nothing to do with someone. When it comes to God, serving God, He makes it very clear. There's no restriction on the woman to fast. There's no restriction on the woman to observe her contact prayers. So this tells us that our religion, the religion that we are following, submission is giving absolute and maximum and full equal rights to women. That's the message of the Quran. When it comes to serving God, there is no hindrance for a woman. She has the equal opportunity just like a man. And that's why God says that God has prepared for them forgiveness and a great recompense. So God gives such individuals, regardless of their gender, forgiveness and recompense. They will be given equal reward for their deeds. Just because a woman is doing something and a man is doing something else, there is no difference. And that's the same case when each are performing their duties as a husband and a wife also. When a man is performing his duties as a husband and a woman is performing her duties as a wife, they are going to be equally rewarded by God, because that's God's system. God values her efforts just as He values the efforts of a husband. So the husband should never think, oh, I'm doing this, I'm doing that, so I must be better than her. No. The Quran makes it very clear. That's your duties and that's her duties, and you're a unit. You function together. So this is the message that we understand, because a lot of things that are being propagated in today's world is all misguidance. It's either one of the extreme. It's extreme toxic masculinity or toxic feminism. Both of these things are toxic to a believing community. There's nothing like that. There's an absolute balance, a balanced approach that the Quran teaches us by giving us clear indication of what a man should do and what a woman should do. It's clear indication. There's a perfect harmony there. And children who are growing up in that kind of an environment will definitely have no mental health issues. Nowadays, most families you look, they have some mental health issues. The children are, because there's too much chaos in the families. Kids are exposed to, couples fighting with each other, violence, men throwing stuff at women, women throwing stuff at men. Imagine what kind of a what is the child being exposed to? The child is being exposed to a lot of stress. So it shouldn't come as a surprise that when that child grows up and becomes an adult, there will be some sort of behavioral issues. So how can we avoid all that? God has given us a clear guidance. It's all about submitting to God's system. If we start following our own egos, like I am better than her and she's this, that means disaster one-on-one. Eventually it is not going to work. That's what we see with extreme liberal thinking and also the extreme conservatism. When we look at, for example, traditional Islamic, the woman is not even allowed to come to talk. She's not allowed in most cases, if not all. It's not even allowed. Men have absolute control of everything, and they use religion to justify it. So clearly the Quran teaches us what is the perfect system, what is the perfect way to have a balance in our society, what are the roles. So there is mutual respect between genders. We are not competing, because the Quran doesn't teach us to compete against the other gender. It teaches us to complement each other. So there is harmony. There is compassion between the man and the woman, the wife and the husband. There's respect, there's compassion, there's forgiveness. But this doesn't exist in today's society. They are competing against each other. I have witnessed it with my own eyes while I was working with one company and the husband and wife was running a business. They are running a business together. They're supposed to work together, right? But they're competing against each other, and we are in the middle of it, the staff. You see. So this is what is happening in today's society, and that's because of misguidance. They don't understand the concept that God has taught us. If they knew it, they will work together. They'll keep their egos aside and work together to function. And in those cases, definitely God will support them in whatever they have taken upon themselves, whether it's to simply raise a family or run a business or whatever it may be. God will definitely support them. Tubur Allah repent. Alhamdulillah, ashhadu an la ilaha illallah wahdahu la sharika lah. Praise be to God. I bear witness that there is no God but God, and He has no partners. We know that in the Quran also, there's a whole chapter that is dedicated to women. And one should wonder that there must be a wisdom behind it, right? Why would God dedicate a whole chapter for one particular gender and totally excluding the other gender? Why would that be? There should be a reason behind it. Every chapter in the Quran indicates something very profound. When it talks about Al-Baqarah, it has to do with the ego of the human being, like what the people of Moses did. So every chapter, the title has some sort of a significance. It cannot be totally random, right? So we know traditionally women, because of their status in many societies, they have been oppressed, treated very badly. In many cases, and this is not, there's no big difference in modern world also. It's a different kind of oppression that is happening. Sometimes women end up oppressing themselves also. So all kinds of things are happening. So this is the reason why God has, this is a total chapter dedicated to the subject of how women should be treated. There's an entire chapter, and that is the greatness of the Quran, because the Quran is not simply giving us some instructions, it's also dealing with problems that exist within human societies. Many issues have been dealt with. Divorce, how they conduct, how to treat women and orphans. Many such rules exist within the Quran. There's no religious book that gives clear indication as to how to treat a woman during and after a divorce. You can't just throw her out on the street. There's a clear instructions in the Quran as to how that matter should be dealt with. The general trend or the general concept behind the Quran is protection of women and children. That is the approach that the Quran takes. And why is that? It's because these verses are actually talking to men. They're talking to men because why? And that is another question. Like people are, why the Quran is only addressing men? Why not? It's not addressing the women? Because men have been given the responsibility. So whoever is responsible, for example, if I come to your home and I have to get something done, I'm going to ask the man who's responsible for the family, right? Okay, please bring your family there, because the man is responsible for it. So similarly, when God has appointed someone as the person who's responsible for carrying out certain things, he's going to address that particular person. So that's why all these verses are directed primarily at men, telling them this. That's why in the Quran they say, "Tell the believing women." So that's telling the men to tell them. Why? Why can't God just say, "Women, do like this"? Why? Because you have to think about it. Why does God not directly address the woman and say, "Woman, please do like this"? Doesn't say, "Tell the believing woman." Why? Because it's the responsibility of the man. You have to take care of them. You see? So all those laws that are with regards to women, it is telling the men to do these things, to protect them. Tell them to do like this, where they draw their clothes over their chest so that they may be recognized. Because it's your duty to protect them from insult. If someone misbehaves, it is your responsibility. You are doing a bad job of protecting your women. So that is why God is putting all those responsibility on the men. And whenever certain rights are also given to men, God gives them conditions. It says in Surah 2 verse 223, "Your women are the bearers of your seed. Thus you may enjoy this privilege however you like." Now this is a right. You have a right. You have certain. God did not just give you certain responsibilities and only responsibility. He gave you some rights also, but with condition. So long as you maintain righteousness. So you can only enjoy that privilege so long as you maintain righteousness. If you are an oppressive husband, you have no right. You lose that privilege. So a woman can deny you. So again, God is addressing the men, saying that thus you may enjoy this privilege however you like, so long as you maintain righteousness. You shall observe God and know that you will meet Him. It's like a warning to men, so that you shall observe God and know that you will meet Him. So don't do unrighteous things and don't harm other people. It's very clear. Give good news to the believers. There are certain verses also that speak directly to the women, and this is in terms of the rights of the husbands. Whenever the rights of the husbands are being spoken about, God is speaking to the women. For example, in Surah 2 verse 228, God says, "The divorced women shall wait 3 menstruations before marrying another man. It is not lawful for them to conceal what God creates in their wombs if they believe in God and the last day. In case of pregnancy, the husband's wishes shall supersede the wife's wishes if he wants to remarry her. The women have rights as well as obligations equitably. Thus, the man's wishes prevail in case of pregnancy. God is Almighty, most wise." So, only in case of when a woman is pregnant, the wishes of the husband shall supersede the wife's wishes. So that then the Quran makes it very clear that in case there is a child, the husband's wishes. Why? Because the responsibility has been given to the husband. The man has to take care of the child. So when the woman refuses it, she is denying denying him from carrying out his obligation, which is to take care of the child. So that is why God is telling in this particular verse that in such a scenario where there is a child involved, his wishes will supersede the wish of the woman, because you cannot prevent him from taking or carrying out his obligation. Thus the man's wishes prevail in case of pregnancy. God is Almighty, most wise. So these are the laws that God has very clearly told us in many verses with regards to dealing with women. We have certain laws that are giving us responsibilities, and also certain laws that gives us certain rights, but with conditions. Everything is with conditions. So as you can see, the Quran gives us a very balanced approach of how to maintain good relationships between genders. When we raise the next generation, we know that there's all kinds of weird ideas floating around. You go nowadays, people are exposed to the internet and all those things. All kinds of toxic, gender war is going on everywhere. So it is where do we take the guidance from? We have to take the guidance from the Quran. Quran gives us the most balanced, the most perfect guidance. And that is the guidance that we have to follow. We all have to keep our egos aside. There's no competition, there's no gender war, there's nothing going on. As far as God is concerned, there are clear roles for man and woman. And if they carry them out perfectly, without oppression, without injustice, that's why God says, so long as you maintain righteousness. Without injustice, without oppression, the family unit will work very well. So may God guide us and help us in making the right decisions with regards to how we carry out our responsibilities as believing men and women. Inshallah, may God guide us all. Aqim as-salam.